Well, joining me now is the United Nations Children's Fund spokesperson, James Elder, who's just returned from Gaza. He was there during the pause and resumption of fighting in the Strip. UNICEF, which delivers supplies such as medicine and clear water to Gaza, has called for a complete and immediate ceasefire. James Elder, you have just come back just days ago. What have you learned about conditions in southern Gaza since your return?
They've deteriorated. It's so hard to capture that things can keep getting worse. But the thing that we kept trying to warn people of is not just this bombardment, not just this indiscriminate level, which is killing large numbers, unprecedented numbers of children, Kathy, but the conditions on the ground are just rife for disease. People are being pushed into areas with no clean water, no sanitation. They're called safe zones. It's a cynical use of language. They have nothing to do with safety. Legal safety is not just not being bombarded. Legal safety is access to a toilet or to clean water. There is none of that. The only water now is rain. So we now have this case of 100,000 children with diarrhoea, 150,000 with respiratory illnesses. We're going to, as a doctor said to me, start seeing the same number of deaths of children from disease on the ground as this horror that we see from the skies.
And this is a critical situation now, but getting worse in the next few days.
This would be our highest level of a humanitarian emergency, what you've got on the ground based on disease, devastation of homes, devastation of people's capacity, if you didn't have 200 aerial bombardments a day. But you have both.
And dumb bombs, you know, these indiscriminate missiles, what will be the impact of that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the military expertise, but what we've been saying for a long time is it's been indiscriminate. When UNICEF calls this a war on children, we don't do that lightly. We do that because twice the number of children are being killed here as a percentage as previous conflicts. That's because of the density, and that's because of a disregard, whether it's safe zones that aren't safe, or indiscriminate nature of bombing, or simply disproportionality. And that's why we're seeing 6,000, 7,000 children being killed, rising every day.
Well, you delivered these very powerful, very impassioned videos from Gaza while you were there. You appealed to world leaders to show compassion. Do you think those appeals have been heeded?
I think yesterday, when we just saw a General Assembly vote and we saw 32 countries change and come over and talk about a ceasefire, that's a good sign. That is a sign. And it's a big sign too for people in Palestine and in the region who feel like the world is listening, because often they don't. So that was critical, but it hasn't changed anything right now.
Well, because the US hasn't changed.
It hasn't.
Despite noises and, you know, increasing discomfort, the leadership hasn't changed its view.
No, and we've heard lots of noises, and they're important. We've heard that the South will not possibly be allowed to endure what occurred in the North, and I bore witness to that is absolutely not the case. It's every single bit as ferocious in the South, and it's worse in the North, except now there's 1 million more civilians in the South. Well,
you know, Israel now says today that it needs several months to defeat Hamas. What is your response to that?
I don't know any word that would be diplomatic apart from, I don't have it, Kathy. It'd be a massacre of children. We will start seeing levels of child deaths that the world has not seen for a long time if we're not already there. This threat of disease is very, very real. As a doctor said to me, James, we are not this is not the perfect storm. We are in the storm. And if we're now going to continue for 2 more months, I don't know where else you bomb. I genuinely don't. If you've got 200 bombs, whatever sorts they are, there is nowhere else really to hit. So the level, hospitals are war zones for children, 1,000 children with amputations, 2,000 under the rubble somewhere that the world's forgotten. It's hell.
And you know, it featured some of those children in your videos. Have you been in touch with some of their families since? How are they coping?
They're not. An interesting thing I found was that so many of those children during the pause, the ones with severe injuries started to come back. You saw childishness come back into their face. They would again start to talk even. Parents will say now they know what bombardment sounds like. They have amputations to show that. So they've gone silent again. There's one little boy who struck me, Kathy, because his mother was killed, his father was killed, his twin brother was killed, and he would close his eyes for long periods when he would speak. And I asked his auntie why, and she just said he's terrified that he will forget what his mum and dad look like. So he closes because that's where he wants to imagine them. He too, in the last few days, what I've heard, is just sits with his eyes closed and doesn't speak. This is a nation of children, or 1 million children, call it what you will, Gaza, who are traumatised. Gaza is no place for children to recover, but it's a home to 1 million children, as you allude to, that some world leaders are clearly oblivious to.
James Elder, thank you very much for joining us.